Call to order the Madison County Board of Education meeting for September 22nd, 2022. First up on our agenda is our vision, and Ms. Cobb's going to read it.
Madison County Schools, in partnership with the community, strives to equip educators and students with the skills to lead by example, develop and speak with a unique voice, and explore their academic curiosity to make a positive impact on our community and world.
Thank you. Next up is audience comments regarding agenda items. We have none. Next up is number 4, which is our consent agenda. These are items that appear regular on our agenda and the board members are very familiar with. We've had these for about a week to look over. The items on the consent agenda are the minutes of September 8th, 2022 meeting, Madison Southern High School FFA trip to National FFA Convention in Indianapolis, Indiana, Madison Central High School FFA trip to the National FFA Convention in Indianapolis, Indiana, 3 additional Section 504 chairpersons, and declare some machinery surplus. Are there any questions? If no questions, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Ms. Brock.
Second.
Second by Ms. Cool. All those in favor? Aye. Next up is our action agenda. Number 5A, which is to approve one emergency teacher certification for Ferristown. I think this is something we've done several times this year.
We've had to do a few times this year, yes, and this particular one is for middle school science. So the individual does have a teaching certificate, just not in that subject area, so.
Any questions? If not, can I have a motion to approve the emergency certification for one teacher at Ferristown Middle School?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Cobb,
I'll second.
second by Ms. Burford. All those in favor? Aye. Next up is 5B, which is to approve our 2022-2023 working budget.
Look at that.
Good evening. How are you
Woods
all?
has a very large book.
That would be my Bible. That is our budget for this year, so.
Our Bible, too.
All right. We'll jump right into it here. You have a copy in front of you of the working budget. I'll remind you, this is the third time you've seen the budget. So, we start in January with the draft where we have very little information. In May, we do the tentative where we have just a few more pieces. And now we have all the pieces to the puzzle. So we can put the budget together and go through it. So we'll start out on page 1 there with the general fund budget. And as you'll notice, I made some notes for you there. We are starting out with our contingency from the end of the year. We were able to hold that intact as we ended the end of 2022, and we are bringing that into this budget to start. Moving down the page there, you also have our tax rate, our tax revenue. You can see the increase there from the tentative budget was approximately $1.6 million. After assessments and everything, we were able to get this data and pull that in. Most of that is a result, actually all of that is a direct result of new property that was added this year. So that's where the increase came from on that. Move on down, you see motor vehicle. I have increased that as compared to the tentative budget by about $550,000. And after the assessments came in, we actually had the total assessed value, so then we could apply the rate so we could see what our tax revenue would be there. Occasionally, that'll be a little bit higher with some of what we call, it's called the Freddie freeloader tax, and that's big semis and things that haven't paid taxes into the state, and we get that from the Department of Revenue. A lot of times it's when vehicles get pulled over to the side and they get inspected, they pay additional motor vehicle taxes, and that causes our rate to be a little bit higher there. Moving on down the page, excuse me, I did increase the utilities tax compared to where we were in the tentative by about $200,000, and that's just based off of the prior year's expenditures. Just a reminder about that one, that's based on usage. So if we have harsh winters and hard summers, increases usage, our utility tax goes up. If it stays fairly mild, then that amount could be less. Move you on over, page 2, the only thing I really want to point out there, towards the middle of the page, admitted property tax, you can see as compared to actuals in prior years, we never really know what that number is going to be because that is based on state audits. So we kind of budget right in the middle, and some years it's been lower than that. You can see past 2 years it's been a little higher, so it's all dependent on audits that are performed. At the bottom of the page, I did increase the interest on investments. We've talked about that I'm getting ready to reinvest our CDs to get us a little more there. Plus, the rates are up as compared to last year quite a bit. So we should be able to get our investment interest up substantially. Moving over to page 3, the big item there in revenue is SEEK. And our SEEK is actually a reduction compared to where we were at the tentative budget. Once we did get our assessments in, we actually outpaced the rest of the state in growth, and when that happens, it negatively impacts our SEEK. So our SEEK is actually down $330,000 from where we budgeted at the tentative. The tentative numbers were numbers provided by Kentucky Department of Education, and they were based on where they thought the state would hit. So once we got all the assessment data, our growth in our county on assessments really hurt us, to be quite honest, and it did cause this. One thing I did want to point out in this as well, this did include full-day kindergarten funding. It did include additional transportation funding and the $100 per pupil that the legislature appropriated. Without that, we would actually be down $1.04 million on SEEK as compared to last year. So you can see we did have substantial growth as compared to the rest of the state.
So, Mr. Woods, I'm just going to kind of remind everybody how that works. The more money we get that we collect off of our property tax assessments, the less money we get from the state.
Yes, it's basically the more our assessments go up, they reduce our SEEK by the amount of assessments as compared to the rest of the state. There's an equalization factor in there, and if we outpace the state in assessment growth, then yes, it can reduce our state dollars from SEEK, and it has substantially. Moving on, there's not a whole lot of other changes in revenue. Till we get over to page 6. Excuse me. On the Medicaid revenue, you can see that I did reduce the budget compared to the tentative by about $50,000, which would be about an $85,000, $84,000 drop as compared to what we brought in this last year. But they're actually looking at our main funding will be a reconciliation of 2020, 2021 school year, and the transportation costs were reduced out of that in the final calculations based on the way Medicaid calculates, because we had days that we were not in school. So that's going to impact us, and it will reduce our Medicaid, overall Medicaid funding. It takes, about a year and a half for us to get that in. So that is our biggest piece, is that reconciliation piece, and so it will have a negative impact this year. On down the page, the indirect cost transfers there, you can see most of that is due to our ESSER and CARES funding, and indirect is just money for us administering the funds. It allows us to offset our costs for having to track and report on all of that. So indirect and food service make up that line item. So that takes us through the revenue side. We'll jump on over to the expenditures. So really, the main part of the expenditures that have changed is I sit down and I go through every person in our district and make sure that they're all accounted for and they're all properly coded to the proper fund, and that we have enough money budgeted in those categories. That's where your changes come in here, because our budget's about 76% salaries and fringe. So I went through here, and if you look at that compared to prior years, it looks a little off, but we've had increase in teachers. We've also had, over the past 2 years, we've had ESSER and CARES funding that we've been able to reduce some of our expenditures and move things. We might be able, as we progress through the year, things that qualify, we might be able to move over to that funding. If we do, we will move some items over. On down, page 9, as I always remind you, you'll see that employees benefit down towards the bottom of the page. I've got a note there. It looks substantially large, but we use that as a placeholder and to merely budget one place for our work comp, dental claims, our general liability, and unemployment insurance. Move on over to page 11. And like I said, there's very little changes in the overall budget other than accounting for our salaries. I did have some increased expenditures, and I'll tell you what those were, other expenditures in just a minute. But on page 11, you'll notice there down at the bottom of the page where I've got that note, property looks really low. Last year's totals compared to what we have it budgeted this year, that's our bus POs. So we bought buses. We don't pay for them until they come in. As you can see, it's taken a long time to get some buses in. It's projected to get worse. According to a meeting I was in last week, it's projected to get even worse on timing. So once those come in, we will pay that bill. Those POs, those monies are reserved in prior year, and they're carried over to this year. So we budget the monies and the expenditure in this year to offset those. When we get those buses, we will pay for those. Moving on to page 13. The real big thing, just to show you there, is our contingency line. And you can see in order to balance this budget, it does take $1 million of our contingency. We talked about that at tentative when we were going through that it would probably take that in this next year. We'd planned for that, trying to put some money back ahead. And in order to balance this, it will take $1 million of our contingency to balance this budget. Some other items, just to give you a few items through there that we did have to increase. I went back and looked, and we talked about it during tentative. Our diesel fuel, prices spiked on us, so I did go back and add more money in the budget. After I saw what we spent by the end of the year, it wasn't enough, so the budget did increase by $500,000. We have the Ignite Academies that have opened, and we do have some additional costs beyond funding that we've received to help offset and operate those. Those additional costs will be about $700,000 that we needed to account for to take care of those. So those are the main changes in the budget. The rest of the items moving down through the budget, special revenue, that's our grants from the state. Those are pretty self-explanatory. They don't change much from tentative. We changed the balances a little bit to offset for our final title allocations. We did get LAVEC funding to help operate the Career Center, and we had some money where we agreed to start running the Kentucky Tech Center. So we had some money from the state, and that did increase that section of budget. The rest of it through there is very little changes. FSPK would be your only other big change. And that is due to tax revenue, because that's nickel taxes. So in that, when you have increase in there in your assessments, you also have increased amount that has to come in for the building fund there, since it's a nickel tax for building and can only be used as such. So we did have to make that change, and that would be on starts on page 31. And we did have to increase that budget to account for that, and our the final numbers of the equalization of our nickels from the state. Really, that's it. It's pretty mundane. Like I said, most of it will be in salary and fringe. Some supply categories here and there that, like I said, we had to adjust for inflation. What questions do you have?
I didn't see any surprises, so that's good.
I try not to bring surprises.
And
And it is the third time I've seen it. It's not-
It is the
Right.
third time. I try to get as much in there in the first two versions so that there are no real surprises by the time we get to this one. And most of it's just finalizing out the final pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah. I was a little shocked by the buses, but they're not here yet. Nothing we can do about it.
No, and it's just, when you've got every district in the state ordering buses, and there's only a couple of bus providers, it's going to take time. The last estimate at that meeting I was at, they said it could take 8 months this next year to get buses in at least, or longer. They said, but to count on 8 months.
And also impacting that is western Kentucky and eastern Kentucky. There were a lot of buses that were destroyed in
Damaged,
both the flood and the tornado, so
Yes.
I think those districts kind of moved up priority on the
Yeah,
bus
as well
ordering
they
piece,
should.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone have any questions?
Are there counties loaning them buses or anything like that?
Yes.
Like some of our buses that we don't use?
Yeah.
Any other questions? No. Can I have a motion to approve the 2022-2023 working budget as presented?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Ms. Burford,
I'll second.
second by Ms. Cobb. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next up is 5C, which is to approve the BG3, revised BG1, and final plans for Madison Middle School. There's Tony. He was hiding behind the post. I didn't see
Behind the
him.
pole, yes, I was hiding. Good evening, everyone.
Tony, how are you?
Good, good. So the agenda item before you tonight is to approve the BG3 and the revised BG1 and the final plans for the new Madison Middle School. It's been a long time coming, but the time is here. The BG3 and the revised BG1 are pretty much identical forms. They're basically cost estimates that Katie keeps wanting us to update as we move forward, which also stands to reason that at the final plans, they would also want to see those forms. So they're in the same agenda as approving the final plans for the middle school. If we look at the BG3 and the BG1 first, which I'm assuming you've got copies of ahead of time, the construction, just to break it down to very general terms, the construction estimate is 43 million, sorry. We wish 43,000. We wish 43,000. $43,776 with soft costs gets you to 49,292,860 for the BG3. If you look at the revised BG1, those numbers vary just a little bit because the BG3 went to your fiscal agent. The fiscal agent, did a few numbers in there and added to it. So it's the revised BG1 is a total of $49,791,227. And of course, the funds available is something that has been worked through with Mr. Woods and Dr. Gillum and your fiscal agent as well. Looks like there's some SFC cash requirement and bond sale, and of course, a good chunk of it is your FSPK bond sale. So before I dive into the plans and renderings of the final plans, any questions on either one of those two documents? Okay, well, we will, and we can come back to it if we need to. I've got a few slides to go through here, and if you need to reflect back, that's fine. So on the design project, a lot of this you've already, we're going to go through some of the basics as quickly as possible. But you've seen this several times in schematic and design development. Not a lot has changed. But here's the site plan for the total facility. So remember that what the cost estimates you see on the BG3 and the BG1 include this entire site with all the athletic facilities and buildings associated with it. There's a 98,000 square foot, of course, middle school, but then there's the total square footage with all the lockers and everything is 110,000 square feet of building. So pretty good sized project, in addition to the fields and roads and tracks. Of course, Goggins Lane to your right there, north is pretty much up. Where it says development is the local developer who's developing the property. School, soccer, football, parking, baseball, softball. If we scoot in just a little bit there, you can see the buses and how the bus lane will work around there, and cars driving around the parent pickup area. Again, the soccer and the football, very similar to a Cottle Ferristown situation. The other half of the site, up at the top, you can see the locker. There's a locker building, which I'll show a floor plan of, grandstands, press box, concessions building for the football and soccer. Then there's a, excuse me, softball and baseball field with parking, and you can see there's a concessions building there as well. Each one of those fields has a press box and a little restroom connected with it, and a little storage building. We'll look at that a little closer.
Can I ask
So-
a quick question on that?
Yes, yes.
I thought we were having two entrances in there. I only saw one.
I'm sorry, here, yeah, there's an entrance down, and I should have identified them a little better. There's an entrance to the right off of Goggins,
Right, up at the top.
and,
Right above
Oh.
the middle. See where it says middle?
I'm sorry, it's down there just below the soccer field, and
Okay.
unfortunately,
Oh.
I zoomed in just a little too close there. I'm sorry, I cut
That's a
off.
good question, I didn't.
That's fine.
No, that is a good question, and I'm sorry that I cut it off.
So buses pull around front,
Buses pull around
parents around
front.
back?
Generally speaking, what we had talked about is that they would both come in off the development. So they would turn off of Goggins Lane and get on the development boulevard pretty quickly, so they're not out there. I mean, Goggins is a good three-lane road, and people can turn off in there. But generally, everybody's going to turn off into Goggins, to that boulevard down there where it
Right.
says development. And then they'll come down to the new main entrance, and, I'm sorry, I cut that off down at the bottom. They will both pull in. The buses will turn to the right and go around to the front of the school and park along the front of the school, which is on the right. And let's see, I'm sorry, I had a bigger blow up there. There's two side entries. I thought that was kind of a blow up. There was a side entry you can see the development at the south, the side entry, one on Goggins and one off the boulevard. So like I said, everybody, again, what principals do and what Madison County, how they bring the buses and cars in can be changed in the future.
Right.
But it's designed around the idea that they'll both come into the development, turn up into the site, so there's 400 or 500 feet of lane there, to get off the boulevard. Buses turn to the right, loop around to the front of the school, come back out the same way. The parents will turn left. And that can be double lane. You'll go left, drive around the football field, go all along the north side of the property, and come across the end of the gym there, which would be like a Cottle Ferristown situation. So they can double stack hundreds of cars all the way back around to that site entry.
Thank you for that. because
Yes.
That was our big concern, not having any traffic backup on Goggins.
Yeah.
Yes,
Just real quickly, having two lanes, having it 2 lanes wide all the way through, and where it's all connected all the way back beyond the football field, and then the road that cuts in the middle, and then the circle up front. Between all of those pieces, you've got about 7 or 8 different configurations that you could bring people in and stack
Right.
cars, and there is, we can bring parents in, if car riders becomes an issue, we can bring them off of Goggins Lane, stack them all the way around in front of the football field, around the football field, all the way in, and have them go on the back side of the school down that road and enter into that rear entrance, and the parents could circle on around while buses could come in off of the development road and circle in the front and get out. Or we could flip that, or,
Right.
there's multiple
Similar to like Cottle.
scenarios.
Yeah.
So we should not have any traffic backing up onto the road that's waiting for parent drop-offs or anything. Yeah.
We'd even talked about where it says 450 total parking spaces. If there were that many, and usually your elementary is even worse, but in middle school you still have a lot. They could turn down and loop through that parking lot where it says 450 parking spaces.
Do a loop around.
Do a little loop down through there and then come back out, and that would give you even more lanes there.
We should not have.
Well, and that's what I'm
It
saying.
should be.
Yeah,
It's
after the-
more than adequate for
Yeah.
that.
But there are a lot of car riders.
Oh, yes,
I go
there
through the
are.
drop-off line.
But usually after the first 2 or 3 days,
It lightens
you
up.
cut it down to about 60% of what it's like the first day.
Well, right now, there's so many kids.
So that was, and here we're zoomed in again, and zoomed into the other end. So any more questions on the site? Now, we're approving final plans now, so this is kind of a technical master plan. So you're approving the full set of plans that will go out to bid. Of course, I think you got 30 or 40 sheets maybe in an email or webcast to you. This is the floor plan that you all have seen in schematic, in design, and in design development. It's basically, in big picture, it's Cottle Fairstown plan mirrored, but now there are several changes as well that we've talked about. So just to reiterate, you got 22 classrooms, 10 resource rooms, special ed, 6 science rooms, a distance learning, 3 computer classrooms and a computer lab, SPDM classroom, art, home ec, band, music, and then all your other typical commons areas, which are the media center, gym, locker, cafeteria, kitchen, custodial, administration suite, teacher lounge, youth service center, staff workroom. Now, what's not shown on here as the program spaces, of course, you have 2 concessions buildings and lockers and grandstands and press boxes. If we zoom in a little bit, you can see now I've turned the building 90 degrees on you from where it was facing Goggins. The entry is now at the bottom, so Goggins Lane would be running across the bottom of the page. Entry with offices on the right, offices on the left, youth service on the right. You walk into a large lobby corridor there, media center on the left, gymnasium on the right. As you keep working towards the back, there's the cafeteria and kitchen. Cafeteria is bigger than the other one that we've seen. And the kitchen is more like Fairstown, but we've made a few adjustments there. You can see band and music along the back corridor. There's a big dock back there for trucks to pull in and drop off for
Around
the
the back.
kitchen.
Oh, for the kitchen.
Yeah, for the kitchen. Well, and it's also set up that custodial receiving, paper, furniture, but the kitchen will use it mostly. This is kind of the central core of the building. All the things right there in the center are the very heavy data, media-driven. You got the media center and 4 computer labs with more of the specialty areas around it. You got 3 classroom wings, presumably 6, 7, and 8. One of them, this particular one, will serve as a storm shelter. We talked about the new codes requiring some area to be a storm shelter. So that area will have a concrete roof and thick walls, and the only way not to do it as a part of your normal function area is to build a whole nother building and take up that square footage, which is extremely expensive. So we might as well take advantage of some of the area that's already built. And then, of course, the other 2 classroom wings, each classroom wing has its own set of bathrooms, 2 science rooms, and, of course, typical classrooms. And Ben will be happy to know that it has IDF areas, data areas as well. And, of course, I should have mentioned that. I mean, we've worked with all of the Madison County staff. In fact, we still have one more meeting to go with kind of a final meeting with them. But Dr. Gillum, Mr. Neely, Mr. Clark, just everybody's been involved. And before this thing actually hits the street, everybody will be satisfied with what's going out to bid. Here's the kitchen. You can see you come into the serving at the bottom, the kitchen in the middle, cooler, freezer, and dry food storage in the back. Media center right off the lobby. 2 areas of classrooms can be seated there with a lot of shelving in the middle. The circulation desk is to the left where that person would have control over the AV and workroom and storage right behind them, and doors into the computer labs. This is a typical science room. There's 6 of them. These are pretty similar to what you're familiar with at Cottle and Fairstown, with casework around the outside, movable tables on the inside, and all this furniture is included in the contract with a demonstration table. Art room, pottery wheels, wash-up sinks, casework, kiln room, storage room, all the things you're familiar with what is already going on in typically in Madison County middle schools, and maybe even a little better. Home economics room. We basically, and I think I discussed this in design development, we did a lot of casework around the outside, and it's a large space. But we left it flexible so that you all can use this area. Instead of putting a lot of ovens and casework right in the middle of the floor, you can use this as a large lecture lab, and it can be flexible in the future. It could be something other than a home economics room. So that takes us out of the building and gets us into, this is the locker room. Of course, now the football side is towards the top, so there's 2 larger rooms there, only one having lockers, because what we discussed with the local staff there, and of course, Dr. Gillum. And two smaller rooms on the other side, and each one of those locker rooms has their own restrooms and little storage areas. The Concessions Building, again, similar to what you see at Caudill and Ferristown, except because of new plumbing codes, we had to actually add toilets and stalls, and they make them bigger nowadays. But storage, and then the concessions on the left. This is a smaller concessions at the softball, baseball area. Concessions on the right, and the toilet rooms and the mechanical room. The softball and the baseball both have a press box. You can see the large window at the bottom there. That would be facing home plate. And then a family restroom and a storage building. And that's it for the plans of the building. Any questions on the functions or curriculum or layout of the building? Otherwise, we'll go into the renderings. And again, before I'm finished, anybody has any questions, we can go back to anything. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to remember in looking at these renderings is you're not choosing color tonight. We have a few options so we're showing you different options that are possible, but colors will come later. You almost have to think of them as just kind of white right now. But here are some options, and of course, we showed you some before, and of course, this has the purple canopy out front for, of course, the Purple Panthers. But this is one option. This would be looking almost from that entry from Goggins Lane at the front of the building. And then that would, if you went over to the boulevard and looked back at the classroom areas, then this is another potential color option going back to that entry and then moving over towards the boulevard classroom area.
So
I'm sorry, yes.
this front view is from Goggins.
Yes.
You're standing on Goggins looking.
Yeah, that area where we said side entry, which would be kind of the north entry, that's like turning in, getting out of your car and looking at the school right there. And then the other would be if you're turning down the boulevard, getting ready to drive past it to go into the other entry, that's that view. So you're looking at the classroom wings there. Oh, I went to the interior, but, so that was three different options on color schemes. And again, when we come back to you with brick and metal roof and colors, it may not be any of these, but you see what's possible. And we can always refer back to these. So if you walk in the front door, that's what you see. Nice clerestory natural light coming down. That area has brick. You can see where the corridor extends back towards the cafeteria. And this is if you stood there and turned back around at the entry that you just came through, your offices would be on the right, family resource on the left. If you turn back around and start walking into the corridor, this would be the media center on the left and your gym entries on the right. Oh, and I will say, there's been the only thing, you're probably looking at all that white floor and thinking, is it going to be a white floor? There's no color added to there's no floor scheme yet. So we'll do something with the floor, obviously, but all the walls and ceilings have something going on. Step into the media center. This is what you would see in the media center. And of course, we put a lot of, purple in some of our schemes. So, and this is if you go inside the media center and looking back, you can see something we've done recently in other middle schools is have a little electronic fireplace there with some lounge furniture around it. So it's totally electronic. Oh, it's, and there'll be some charging stations there, things of that nature. Walk into the gymnasium. You've got some color up highs, the acoustical panels to kind of deaden the sound in there a little bit. Bleacher seating for the entire school, and that's a stage with curtains. And again, the colors, we can work with the colors later, but that's something that we've come up with now. And you look back around, you can see the bleachers and the gym colors there. Going to the cafeteria, again, the floor will really help this. Of course, you're going to have a lot of tables and furniture in there. But the serving area on the right and kind of a courtyard parking area out the glass in in the distance there. And that is more of a close-up of one of the renderings that I did, just to give you a little closer view of the front of the building there. And that's it for the PowerPoint slides. I'll be glad to take any questions you have about, oh, I'm sorry, the intent today, of course, the administrative part of it is the specifications that go out. And we're going to advertise to bid on the 9th, which is November the 9th, so that you can consider the bids on November the 10th, Thursday.
Due back on November the 10th, or I'm sorry, due back on November the 9th.
Yes, we would receive the bids and open them on the 9th, so that you all could review them and consider them on the 10th at your normal board meeting.
What kind of alternates are we putting into the bid? Are we doing the flooring, the HVAC, like we did on the ATCs?
HVAC controls, for sure, train controls, but not the HVAC equipment itself. And of course, we've talked to Rodney Mullins and Chris Clark and Dr. Gillum about those things as well. AV, in the last few projects, Madison County has bought the entire purchase, all the AV themselves, so that they ask us to consider, hey, can we just do an alternate this time? And we'll look at it and consider it. Now, one of the things, I've got a meeting with Mr. Clark and Dr. Gillum to discuss flooring, just what kind of flooring. VCT seems to be disappearing, and of course, I think we still have some in this project, but where it's going to be exactly is going to be terrazzo. And one of the considerations will be, what are we doing in the restrooms? Do we like the Line-X product that was put in the tech centers? So we can, if you're suggesting, we can put that alternate in the bids. So those are the two alternates that we have right now. Those are the only two alternates that we have in the bids.
We need to go to the tech centers. I have not been to the bathrooms in there. Did you all?
I didn't go
Yeah.
back.
Right, we didn't go in the bathrooms.
Well, the Richmond ones.
We were in a hurry.
I'm
it
sure.
was day one.
I'm sure.
I think I did.
You went with
I
David
did,
a
'cause I
different
went
day.
and stayed. Yeah.
I just say, I'm really happy for Madison Middle because I know they are going to be so excited to have what they're getting, and just the athletic fields is something that's unreal for them.
This is night. and
Kind of like
day.
Madison Middle, Clark Moore's long due, they were due for a renovation.
And I think the staff, especially the staff, is going to like that this is one story. They've been climbing up 4
Yes.
stories,
Yes,
Well,
indeed.
going
This is so
outside
exciting
to
to
go.
them.
outside to the
Outside
gym
to
and
the gym and
outside to
eat.
the
Cafeteria,
and
outside the
the
band,
band.
outside the technology.
So this is just, I'm so excited for these people, for all of our students and our
It's beautiful.
staff.
Well, thank you.
This is
Thank you.
awesome. Just sorry my kids missed it.
I know my kids miss the
My-
renovations at Whitehall, and
I really don't have words.
Yeah, I really like it, looks good.
Okay, so Tony, before we're getting ready to approve all of these things, before we do that, you mentioned colors. We would approve those later. What we'd probably like to do is do a work session where the board sits down and just kind of goes through some of those things and reach a decision there on that. How far away are we from being able to schedule a work session? Is that something we can do in the next couple of weeks? Are we?
oh, no. Once you bid, it will take a process of 6 to 8 weeks to get all the color samples in from all the
Okay.
different manufacturers. I mean, there's so many things that have color samples, like you've seen those color boards
Okay.
we get. This would be something probably like in February.
Okay.
Yeah, that we could bring the samples in, develop a scheme, put something together, and then we could come back and show it to you again, however many times y'all want to meet, we'll.
Yeah, we like the color boards, didn't we?
Yeah.
Those were nice. You
Oh,
left
yes,
it here. we could-
yes. Oh, right, left it upstairs,
Yeah. So just go ahead and kind of plan
Okay.
for that
Sure.
to be the process as we
Sure.
go through.
Sure.
Anything else? Any questions, comments? Everybody good on that? If not, can I have a motion to approve the BG3, BG1, and final plans for Madison Middle School as
I
presented?
think you should do it.
So moved.
Motion
And
by
I'll
Ms.
second
Cobb,
it.
second by Ms. Burford. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Brock,
Second.
second by Ms. Cool. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm so happy.